Please help me." A bedridden woman begged the thief who had invaded her home. And when her husband arrived, he was left in shock. Frank saw the house, completely dark for the night, and decided that would be the one he'd break into. He was nervous. It was the first time he'd ever done something like this. He didn't consider himself a bad person, but he was desperate. A single father to a 5-year-old boy, he needed money urgently. Even before breaking in, he prayed for forgiveness. He hopped the small fence and looked for a way in. Soon, he spotted a window and, with a little effort, managed to open it from the outside. He entered the dark, silent house, feeling his heart pound as if it were about to explode. Frank looked around, trying to spot anything of value. The house was empty, the furniture covered with a thin layer of dust, as if no one had used it in some time. He continued searching, opening drawers and closet doors, moving slowly to avoid making noise. At one point, he stopped and took a deep breath, his eyes filling with tears. He felt shame and sadness, crying silently with his face hidden in his hands. What was he doing? He was there stealthily to steal something, anything that he could turn into money for his son. He felt terrible, but necessity pushed him onward. Frank continued walking through the house, more slowly this time, almost hesitant. As he passed a room, he heard a weak, muffled voice say, "Please, help me." He stopped immediately, his breath catching. He looked towards the room and, with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, took a step inside. There, in the middle of the dark room, was a bed, and on it, a fragile-looking woman. She was lying down, hairless, her face pale and thin. Her pleading eyes met Frank's. "Help me," she repeated, her voice so low it was barely audible. Frank approached a little, still uncertain, his eyes fixed on her figure. What happened?" he asked, almost unsure what to say. The woman took a difficult, shallow breath and answered in a thread of a voice. "I've been here alone for a long time. I don't have the strength to get out. I feel like I've been abandoned. I just need help, just a little." Frank took a step back, his heart racing. He felt a strange fear of helping, as if every step towards that woman was a step towards confessing what he was doing there. What if someone found out? What if, by helping, he ended up being blamed for something more? The woman, noticing his hesitation, called out to him again, almost begging, "Please, it doesn't matter why you're here. I just need a little help." She held out a trembling hand towards him, and Frank felt the weight of her plea. He looked away nervously and took another step back, almost convinced to flee. But then, the sound of low, suffering sobs echoed through the room. It was the woman's cry. She seemed desperate, helpless, and Frank felt a pang in his chest. He took a deep breath and, with a resigned sigh, decided he couldn't just leave. He approached again, looked at the woman and asked, Do you need water?" She nodded slowly, her lips cracked and dry. Frank left the room, went to the kitchen, and looked for a glass. He found a pitcher and carefully filled the glass. He returned to the room, holding the glass with trembling hands, and gave it to the woman. She drank slowly, the liquid easing some of the suffering on her face. When she finished, she looked at Frank with an expression of silent gratitude. Thank you so much," she murmured, closing her eyes for a moment. She didn't know how to respond. She said she had been barely able to get out of bed for 2 days, with no one to help her. Frank was surprised, her words resonating in his mind. He hadn't expected to find anyone there, much less someone in such a fragile state. 2 days? He asked incredulously. How has no one come to see you? Not even to know if you were okay? Emily gave a faint, tired smile. I guess I don't have anyone who worries about me like that anymore, she replied, trying to hide the sadness in her voice. Frank felt a tightness in his chest and looked around the room, as if searching for something he could do to alleviate her situation. I'll make something for you to eat, okay? He said, trying to keep his voice steady. Emily watched him with a mixture of gratitude and relief. Thank you, she murmured, and before he left, she added, My name is Emily. Frank stopped at the door and turned. "I'm Frank. I'll be right back, Emily, I promise." She smiled, but a shadow of worry crossed her face. "Don't take too long, please. I really won't last much longer without eating." Frank nodded quickly and left the room, heading down the stairs towards the kitchen. He felt strange, as if acting on instinct, without thinking about the consequences. He looked around the somewhat disorganized kitchen and opened the nearly empty refrigerator. He took a deep breath, wondering what he could improvise with what was there. Well, soup might work, he thought, grabbing a few vegetables and a small potato. After washing and cutting everything, he put the ingredients in a pot with water and let it cook. The silence of the house increased his anxiety, and he constantly looked at the clock, aware that Emily needed to eat soon. When the soup was finally ready, he blended it to ensure she could drink it effortlessly. He poured the soup into a bowl and carefully went upstairs again, trying not to spill anything. Upon entering the room, he saw Emily opening her eyes, and she seemed relieved to see him. I thought you wouldn't come back," she whispered, smiling. Frank smiled back, feeling a slight shame, and placed the bowl beside her on the bed. "Here, I hope it's good," he said. "Let's try to sit you up a bit." Emily nodded, and with Frank's help, she settled into a more comfortable position. He took the bowl and carefully began to feed her the soup, spoonful by spoonful. Emily closed her eyes with each sip, savoring the food, and a weak smile appeared on her face. "It's delicious," she said, smiling at him. "Thank you, Frank." Frank smiled a little awkwardly and continued to feed her until she had finished everything. Emily watched him curiously, as if trying to unravel a hidden secret. How did you get in here?" she asked after a moment of silence. Frank felt ashamed. He lowered his head, hesitating before answering. "I came in through the window." Emily raised her eyebrows, a look of mild surprise on her face. "You came in to rob the place?" she asked, in an almost playful tone despite her weakness. Frank took a deep breath, the shame evident in his posture. "Yes," he confessed, looking at the floor. I'm going through a very difficult situation, and I really didn't know what else to do." To his surprise, Emily didn't seem to judge him. On the contrary, her gaze was gentle, almost understanding. "You don't seem like the type of person who would do something like this," she said with a soft smile. "I think you have kindness in your heart." Frank looked at her, surprised, not knowing what to say. He never expected to hear that, especially from someone he found in that situation. "Thank you," he murmured, the words barely leaving his mouth. Emily took a deep breath and, with visible effort, said, "If it weren't for you, I probably wouldn't be here anymore. So, thank you, Frank." He felt a lump in his throat, the weight of responsibility and guilt growing inside him. Even so, he knew Emily was being sincere. "But I was still doing something wrong," he said, feeling obligated to be honest. Emily smiled again, an understanding and sad smile at the same time. "Sometimes life takes us down difficult paths," she said. "We don't always have a choice. But you're here now, and that means a lot to me." She paused, breathing with difficulty, and then asked in a low voice, "Would you do one more favor for me?" Frank nodded immediately. "Of course, whatever you need." Emily gestured towards the nightstand beside the bed. "In the bottom drawer, there's a small box. Can you get it for me?" Frank got up and went to the nightstand, opening the indicated drawer. He found a small, simple but well-kept box and brought it back to Emily. She held the box with trembling hands and, after a moment, carefully opened it. From inside, she took out a delicate necklace with a pendant that looked antique. "Take this," she said, holding the necklace out to him. "This is the most valuable necklace I own. It's yours now." Frank froze, looking at the necklace and then at Emily, not knowing how to react. I can't accept this," he said, shaking his head. Emily laughed softly, a weak laugh but full of a humor he didn't expect. "You broke into my house to rob it," she said, still smiling. "And now you're telling me you don't want to accept the most valuable necklace I own?" Frank laughed a little too, feeling foolish. I guess I really am contradicting myself, huh? He said, embarrassed. He looked at the necklace hesitantly and finally took it carefully. I promise I'll pay back every cent this necklace is worth, he said, determined. Emily watched him with a soft glint of understanding in her eyes. I believe you, Frank. How did you get sick? And why are you alone? He asked. Emily told him everything that had happened from the beginning. A few years ago, Emily was a beautiful, healthy woman. She wasn't American. She lived in the Netherlands, where she led a quiet life full of happy moments. One day, after months of planning, she decided to take a month's vacation to explore a vibrant, tropical country, attracted by its landscapes, culture, and tropical warmth. When she arrived, she was immediately enchanted. In a short time, she made several friends and visited numerous fascinating places. This new country seemed more than a tourist destination. It was a place where she felt at home, as if she should have been there all her life. As the vacation neared its end, Emily began to feel melancholic, sad at the thought of returning. One of her new friends, a local with a light spirit and always ready with advice, suggested she could live there and teach English. To Emily, the idea sounded attractive. However, she knew she would need to learn the local language and resolve several pending matters in the Netherlands before moving permanently. After much reflection, Emily returned to the Netherlands, determined to make the move a reality. It took almost a year to organize everything, but she finally returned, this time with plans to stay. She soon found a job as an English teacher and dedicated herself intensely to learning the local language. In a short time, she was completely fluent, charming colleagues and students with her dedication and friendliness. Emily was beautiful, with fine features and eyes that seemed to hold the Dutch sky. Her beauty drew attention wherever she went. Soon, several men tried to win her over, but she remained distant. One day, her local friend, the one who encouraged her to move, asked, "Emily, why don't you date anyone? There are so many men after you, girl." Emily shrugged, smiling faintly. "I just don't feel like I've found someone special, you know," she replied. Her friend let out an amused laugh. "Oh, Emily, there's no such thing as someone perfect. In the end, we just find someone whose flaws fit less badly with ours." Emily laughed along, but deep down, she didn't share that view. She was a dreamer and believed that one day she would find her Prince Charming, someone who would make her heart beat faster and fulfill the romantic ideal she carried. Then, one day, he appeared. Leonard was a Spanish teacher at the same institution where Emily taught. He had a captivating smile and a gentle way of speaking that caught her attention from the first day. Over time, the two began to grow closer, and before they knew it, they were completely in love. The relationship was intense, and after a year together, they decided to get married. To Emily, it seemed like the fairy tale she had always imagined. Life was perfect with Leonard. But happiness didn't last long. A few years after the wedding, Emily began to feel unwell, and after tests, she received the devastating news: breast cancer. She faced the treatment with courage, but the disease progressed rapidly, and Emily had to undergo a double mastectomy. Now, amidst chemotherapy, she faced hair loss, fatigue, and the fragility of her health. She felt exhausted, drained, and vulnerable. The most painful thing, however, was realizing that people around her began to distance themselves. Friends who once sought her out constantly were now too busy. She felt increasingly isolated, with only Leonard by her side. However, she soon realized that even Leonard was changing. He had married a beautiful, healthy, vibrant woman, but now, faced with the physical and emotional transformations cancer brought to Emily, he seemed distant. Conversations were scarce, and moments of affection rare. Leonard avoided looking her in the eyes, and Emily painfully realized that his love was fading. 2 days ago, while she was lying down, she heard Leonard talking on the phone. He said he was going to the beach with some friends and would be gone for over a week. "She won't last much longer," he commented, his voice low but audible enough for Emily to hear. "When I get back, everything will have resolved itself." Emily felt her heart clench. The man who had once sworn to love her now seemed to be hoping for her end. Silent tears rolled down her face, and she realized she was truly alone. He left that same afternoon, carrying a suitcase and a carefree smile, without even saying a proper goodbye. Now, Emily remained there, in the empty, gloomy room, reflecting on the turn her life had taken. Frank listened to everything. With every word, he felt anger growing inside him, indignant at Leonard's cruelty. He couldn't contain himself. "Emily, he doesn't deserve you. You deserve someone much better, someone who really cares." Emily smiled, but it was a sad smile, laden with bitterness. "I think I was naive, Frank. I believed in this so-called true love," she said, sighing. Frank looked at her sincerely. "It exists, Emily. It's just hard to find." She looked at him for a moment and, with a curious expression, asked, "And how did someone like you, who seems so good and kind, end up breaking into my house like a burglar?" Frank gave a sad smile, looking away. Memories of his past surfaced, bringing with them the pain and shame he tried to bury. Frank was born into a humble family, in a small house where sharing space with his siblings was a constant reality. From an early age, he learned that to survive, he needed to go out and seek something better, something that would sustain him and help him live a dignified life. He carried a dream. He loved to cook and wished to be a chef, maybe even own his own restaurant one day. In the kitchen, he felt free, creative, and found a world that seemed solely his. But for someone in his condition, this dream seemed unattainable. Frank fought hard to take a step towards what he so desired, but reality didn't cooperate. He tried to work as a waiter, but they wouldn't even hire him for that. Years passed, and frustration grew, though he kept trying. Currently, he worked at a car wash, cleaning cars from morning till night. When he got home, tired and smelling of cleaning products ingrained in his clothes, he still prepared dinner for himself with a special touch, as if practicing for the day he would finally be a chef. At home, his parents always insisted he stop dreaming so big. "You're too much of a dreamer, Frank. Drop this chef business and keep your feet on the ground," his father would repeat, shaking his head. "I won't give up, Dad. I just need an opportunity," he would reply, a glint in his eyes that seemed almost to defy what life denied him. But time brought other surprises. About 2 years ago, a woman appeared in his life. They had a brief affair, and she even lived with him for 2 months. At first, it seemed like it could work, but discussions quickly began. They lived in disagreement, and amidst fights and exhaustion, she left. The end of that relationship affected him little. After all, things had never been smooth. But after a long time with no news, she returned, this time with a boy in her arms. "This is your son," she said bluntly. Frank was shocked, his eyes fixed on the child as he processed her words. For an instant, he thought it might be a mistake, a lie, but one look at the boy's face was enough to see a small version of himself. The boy was his spitting image, and doubt dissipated in that instant. He assumed responsibility without hesitation. At first, Gabriel's mother brought the boy over on some weekdays, leaving him in Frank's care. Gradually, he spent more and more time with his father, until one day, Frank found only a text message saying she had moved to another state to live with her new boyfriend. Gabriel would be his responsibility from then on. Frank felt consumed by anger, but at the same time, he didn't hesitate to accept the new reality. He raised Gabriel alone, with all the dedication he could offer. Years passed, and the boy turned 5. Frank dedicated himself to him, doing everything to give his son the best within his means. But lately, something was wrong. Gabriel was a strong child but began to show symptoms that worried Frank. The boy had constant fevers, pains that made him sweat and cry softly at night, cuddled up to his father. Frank took him to several doctors in search of answers, until finally, the diagnosis came. Gabriel had a chronic illness that caused intense pain and would require constant treatment to reduce the symptoms. The medications Gabriel needed were expensive, and to make matters worse, they were in short supply at public health facilities. Frank did everything possible and impossible, but all he managed were a few doses that soon ran out. As the days passed, Gabriel became increasingly debilitated. The moments of pain intensified, and Frank could no longer bear to see his son suffer. Gabriel's cries tore at his heart in a way he could never express in words. It was in one of these moments of desperation that he decided to do something unthinkable. Not knowing what else to do, with no alternatives, and his mind dominated by the urgent need to save Gabriel, he looked around the neighborhood and decided he would try to get money any way he could. His search led him to Emily's house, which seemed empty and was a desperate chance to get something that would help him buy the medicine his son so desperately needed. And now he was there, in Emily's room, after confessing his story and hearing hers, as she also carried her own pain and abandonments. He never expected to expose his whole life that way, nor to find someone who understood his pain. Emily looked at him, absorbing every word, as if recognizing the sincerity in his face. "Frank," she murmured, still weak but with a look of compassion. "I understand now. You did this for your son." Frank nodded, his gaze distant. "I never thought I'd reach this point. But seeing my son suffer like that, without being able to do anything, it destroys me, Emily. I would do anything for him." Emily extended a trembling hand and touched Frank's. A gesture he never would have expected in that situation. "I know what it's like to see dreams and hopes fade away. But you're a good man, Frank. Even in the midst of despair, you still carry love. True love." He lowered his head, trying to hold back tears as she continued. "This necklace I gave you. May it help you get what you need for Gabriel. This is the value I can still give to someone who truly deserves it." Frank took a deep breath, closing his eyes for an instant, and then looked at Emily with silent gratitude, the only thing he could offer in response. That night had transformed him in a way he could never have predicted. Frank looked at Emily, trying to understand how she would survive there alone, abandoned by her husband and without anyone's support. "How are you going to manage, Emily? Staying here all alone?" he asked, concern evident on his face. Emily took a deep breath, her gaze empty, and replied in a melancholic tone. I really don't know. I guess I'll survive somehow. I just didn't expect him to abandon me like this." Frank pondered for a moment, and an idea came to his mind. "Emily, maybe you could come to my house until you're stronger. There, my son and I can take care of you. At least that way you won't be alone." Emily was surprised by the proposal. There was a sincere generosity in Frank that she hadn't expected to find, especially in a situation like that. "I don't know if I should accept," she said with a hesitant expression. "Look, if it makes you feel more comfortable, you can let someone know, just to feel safer," Frank suggested. "But honestly, I think it's more dangerous for you to stay here alone." Emily thought for a moment and finally nodded with a slight smile of gratitude. "No one came to visit me. No one cared actually," she murmured, a touch of bitterness in her voice. "There's no one to tell. I'll trust you, Frank." Frank nodded but realized a problem. "There's just one detail. I have no idea how to get you there," he confessed thoughtfully. Emily gestured towards the garage with a nod. "Leonard left the car in the garage before he left. We can use it." Frank found a wheelchair in the hallway and carefully helped Emily settle into it. He pushed her to the garage, where he saw the car parked. After placing Emily in the passenger seat and fastening her seatbelt, he got into the car but hesitated before starting it. "And your husband?" he asked, looking at Emily, trying to gauge her reaction. She pressed her lips together, and an expression of anger and contempt crossed her face. "I don't want to know about him anymore, Frank. If he can live without me, I can live without him too." Frank nodded and started the car. The journey to his house took a little over an hour. During the drive, he explained, "I live a bit far out. Housing is cheaper there, so it's easier for me to manage with Gabriel and expenses." Emily listened in silence, absorbing Frank's words as she looked out the window, the city lights receding until they disappeared completely, giving way to an empty road surrounded by vegetation. When they arrived at Frank's simple, modest house, he helped Emily inside and settled her in a spare room. As soon as he carefully laid her on the bed, Gabriel appeared at the door, accompanied by their neighbor, Mrs. Grace, who looked after him whenever Frank needed to be away. "Daddy!" Gabriel exclaimed, running towards Frank. He then looked at Emily curiously. "Gabriel, this is Emily," Frank said, introducing them with a smile. "She's going to stay with us for a while." Mrs. Grace, a kind lady with a warm gaze, approached Emily with a welcoming smile. "Don't you worry, Frank. I'll help take care of her too. Don't you worry about a thing." Emily looked at both of them, deeply grateful, and murmured a sincere thank you, moved by the generosity she was receiving. Gabriel approached Emily with the curiosity typical of a child, but also an unusual delicacy for his age. He pulled a chair next to the bed and began to talk, telling her about his imaginary dog and other adventures of a 5-year-old boy. Emily listened, enchanted by Gabriel's innocence and liveliness. But amidst the conversation, she noticed a change in his expression. Gabriel started to make a pained face, trying to hide it with a forced smile. He said goodbye. "We'll talk more tomorrow, okay? I think I'll go to sleep now." "Of course, dear. Good night," Emily said, touched by the boy's sweetness. Gabriel smiled before leaving, but Emily noticed he was visibly uncomfortable. A little later, Frank returned to the room, approaching her with a tired sigh. "He's in pain, isn't he?" Emily asked, worried. Frank nodded, a sad expression on his face. "Yes. He always tries to hide it when the pain comes. He tries to sleep as if it's a way to escape. I've done everything to get the medicine, but..." Frank sighed, unable to finish the sentence. He looked at the floor, trying to contain the frustration he felt. Emily, touched by Gabriel's situation, felt a deep compassion for the boy and for Frank. With a decisive gesture, Emily pulled back the sheet covering her and took out a small box. It was the same one she had shown Frank before, but this time she opened the lid, revealing a collection of jewelry inside. Looking at Frank with determination, she held out the box. "Here. Sell everything in here. This should help with Gabriel's medicine." Frank stood motionless, looking at the box. He felt a mixture of gratitude and hesitation. "Emily, this is too much. I can't accept it," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Emily looked at him with a firm gaze. "Frank, I don't care about this jewelry anymore. It means nothing to me now. Gabriel's well-being, and mine, are much more important. I don't need them, but he needs the medicine." Frank took a deep breath, absorbing Emily's generosity. He took the box, feeling the weight of responsibility and gratitude mixed with hope. "Thank you, Emily. Tomorrow, I'll go into the city to sell the jewelry and buy what he needs." Emily nodded, feeling at peace with her decision. The next day, Frank woke up early and took Emily's jewelry, ready to sell it. He still felt a mixture of disbelief and gratitude for what she was willing to do for Gabriel. As soon as he arrived at the jeweler's and the appraiser examined the pieces, he almost couldn't believe the value he heard. He left the store with an absurd amount of money, a sum he never imagined having in his hands. Back at his house, he found Emily resting in her room. Gabriel was playing in the yard. Frank entered, anxious to share the news. "Emily, for God's sake, it's so much money," he exclaimed, his eyes wide. "I've never seen so much in my life." Emily smiled at his reaction, satisfied. "Was it enough for Gabriel's medicine?" she asked, her voice full of tenderness. "It's enough to buy several houses," Frank said, still in shock. He hesitated for a moment, then added, "Give me your bank account details. I'm going to deposit it all for you." Emily looked at him kindly and agreed, giving him her bank details. She knew Frank was just being honest and respectful, but deep down, she felt happy knowing her sacrifice was helping Gabriel. Frank made the deposit and, with part of the money, immediately went to buy the medication for his son. In the days that followed, he could see the transformation in Gabriel. With the correct medication, the boy seemed different. He played, ran, and smiled around the house with a joy Frank hadn't seen in a long time. Each laugh from his son was a new reason for him to thank Emily, who watched with satisfaction, content to see that at least there, something had changed for the better. "I don't even know how to thank you for all this," Frank said one sunny afternoon, watching Gabriel play in the yard. "You don't need to thank me, Frank. Seeing you both well is enough for me," she replied with a smile. Time passed, and a week later, Frank asked Emily if Leonard had returned. "And your husband? Hasn't he come back?" he asked, somewhat hesitantly. Emily shrugged, her gaze distant. "Maybe. But I really don't care about him anymore. What he did is unforgivable," she said, looking away with a slight bitterness. She quickly changed the subject, looking at Frank with a special request. "Could you do a favor for me?" she asked with a slight smile. "Of course, whatever you need, Emily." She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "Tomorrow is chemotherapy day. I'm stronger now, and," she hesitated but continued, "could you take me to the hospital and stay with me there? I need a companion, and I don't want to go alone." Frank smiled, happy to be able to help. "Of course, Emily. I'll be with you the whole time." The next day, the two left early for the hospital. During the drive, Frank tried to keep the mood light, talking about Gabriel and telling funny stories to distract her. Emily smiled, but he could tell she was nervous, and he understood completely. Upon arrival, Frank observed closely what she faced. First, Emily needed blood tests to check her immunity, ensuring she was fit to receive treatment. Then, she was taken to the chemotherapy room, where the medications were administered. During the process, Frank saw the effects of the medication manifest in Emily. She experienced frequent nausea and dizziness, her face pale and her body fragile. Even so, Emily maintained her composure and thanked Frank for his company. "You're so calm, Frank," she said with a slight smile, trying to push away the discomfort. "Unlike other people, you make me feel like I'm not an obstacle." He held her hand gently. "You're not an obstacle, Emily. You're an incredible, strong person. I'm lucky to be here for you." Meanwhile, Leonard returned home, tanned and rested after days relaxing at the beach. He wore a satisfied smile, imagining he would find the house silent and empty, finally free of Emily's presence. He was sure she would no longer be alive. Upon entering, however, the house was exactly as he had left it, but empty in a way he hadn't expected. Perplexed, Leonard walked through the rooms, calling for Emily, but silence was the only answer. In a mixture of surprise and slight apprehension, he tried calling her cell phone, but the calls went straight to voicemail. Frustrated, he gave up after a few attempts and tossed the phone on the living room table. Days later, amidst his unease, he received a text message. It was from Emily. He opened it anxiously, not knowing what to expect. The text was simple and direct. "Forget me." Leonard stared at the screen, unsure what to feel. On one hand, he felt relieved to realize she had disappeared on her own, which for him was the best solution. On the other hand, there was a pang of worry, a doubt whether Emily might tell someone what he had done. After a few moments, however, he shrugged, convincing himself that she had really given up on him, perhaps tired of everything. His expression relaxed, and he laughed with satisfaction. "Looks like things worked out better than I expected," he murmured to himself with a cynical smile. When Emily felt strong enough, she made an important decision. "Frank, I think it's time for me to rent an apartment just for myself. I feel like I can manage on my own now," she said with a smile. Frank looked at her with a mixture of pride and melancholy. "Of course, Emily. We'll miss you around here, but I'm very happy that you're strong enough to move on. And thank you for everything you did for me and Gabriel." Mrs. Grace, the neighbor, also said goodbye to Emily warmly and made sure to leave an important reminder. "Whenever you need a companion for your chemo sessions, you can count on me, okay? I don't want to hear about you going alone." Gabriel, for his part, was sad. He approached Emily, holding on to the hem of her shirt. "Aren't you going to live with us anymore, Aunt Emily?" he asked with a sad look. Emily smiled, stroking his face. "Of course, I will, my angel. You can visit me whenever you want." The farewell was marked by hugs and emotional smiles. On moving day, Frank helped Emily take her belongings to the new apartment. Their relationship, which had strengthened over those months, would not be interrupted. They continued to see each other regularly, and Frank made sure to accompany her to every chemotherapy session, even though she was stronger. Over time, the hospital visits became less frequent, and Emily began to feel more hopeful. A year passed, and finally, the day of the doctor's appointment arrived, bringing anxious anticipation. Frank was by her side in the doctor's office, holding her hand as they waited. The doctor looked at the exams with a smile. "It's gone," he said with a satisfied smile. Emily covered her face with her hands, tears streaming down her eyes. She began to cry, feeling the gratitude and relief she hadn't felt in a long time. She never imagined she would make it. The fear of losing to the disease was always present, but now, victory was hers. Overcome with emotion, she hugged Frank. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered, holding him tightly. Frank, also emotional, returned the hug, feeling her happiness radiate. As the two left the room and walked through the hospital corridors, he broke the silence. "So, what are you going to do now, Emily?" Emily gave a radiant smile. "I'm going to take better care of myself now. I want to have surgery for breast implants and reconstruct what I lost." She sighed, looking ahead. "I'm also looking forward to my hair growing back. As soon as I have some length, I'll get extensions and wear it really long, like before." Frank looked at her, smiling, and she noticed. "What is it? Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, laughing. "Because I'm happy for you, Emily. I don't think I've ever seen you so excited and so full of life," he replied sincerely. A few months passed, and Emily achieved each of her goals. The surgery was a success, her hair began to grow, and soon she got extensions that gave her the long locks she loved. When Frank saw her, he couldn't contain his reaction. "Wow, Emily! You look like a model," he exclaimed, smiling. "Now you'll make many friends, I'm sure." Emily laughed and shook her head. "I'm not looking for friendships like before. Now I want genuine people by my side, like you and Mrs. Grace." As they talked, Gabriel spotted them and ran towards Emily. He stopped in front of her, tilting his head to the side with a curious look. "Hi, are you okay?" "I'm Gabriel," he said seriously. The three of them burst into laughter while Gabriel looked confusedly at Frank and Emily. "What? Why are you laughing?" he asked, not understanding. Emily knelt to Gabriel's eye level and smiled. "It's me, Gabriel. It's Emily." Gabriel's eyes widened in surprise. "But you look so different," he exclaimed, impressed. Emily smiled, running a hand through her long hair. "I used to look like this before I got sick, Gabriel." The boy was thoughtful for a moment, then broke into a radiant smile. "So now you're back to being my Aunt Emily from before?" Emily laughed and pulled Gabriel into a hug while Frank watched, feeling at peace. She had returned, a new woman, but always the same Emily with a kind heart and warm gaze. Emily would only be considered cured after 5 years of regular checkups. Mrs. Grace or Frank always accompanied her, ready to support her if the disease returned. Fortunately, the test results remained positive, and each appointment was a small victory. On a sunny day, while they were talking after another routine checkup, Emily shared an idea with Frank. "I've been thinking about opening a business," she said, an excited sparkle in her eyes. "I passed by a commercial spot this week and thought, this place would make a good restaurant." Frank looked at her, surprised and curious. "A restaurant?" he asked, his enthusiasm beginning to grow. "That's incredible, Emily. But do you want to do this alone?" Emily shook her head, smiling. "Actually, I wanted to know if you'd be interested in working with me as the head chef." Frank's eyes lit up, a mixture of disbelief and joy. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. Emily nodded, laughing. "Yes, of course I am. The spot isn't big, but I think it has potential. And besides, that soup you made for me that day, I've never forgotten the taste." I'm sure people will love your recipes too. Frank smiled, surprised and grateful, already imagining the restaurant of his dreams. In the months that followed, they dedicated themselves to transforming that small commercial spot into a cozy and charming space. Emily took care of the decoration and administration, while Frank dived headfirst into planning the menu. Finally, the grand opening day arrived, and they welcomed their first customers with butterflies in their stomachs. To their joy, the restaurant was a success, with growing traffic and constant praise. Frank felt fulfilled. Every dish he served was a confirmation that his dreams were finally coming true. He and Emily, already close, became even more united, working side by side. Soon, the partnership in the restaurant transformed into something more. Frank and Emily began to see each other as a couple, a relationship that brought happiness to Gabriel, who had long wished to call Emily Mom. Shortly after, they decided to get married. But amidst their plans, an unexpected obstacle arose. I'm still married to Leonard, Emily said with a sigh while talking to Frank. We need a divorce. But I don't want to see him again. And does he still live in the house where you used to live? Frank asked. I think so, but the last time I passed by, the house looked abandoned. Emily frowned thoughtfully. I'll look for him. I can't stay tied to him forever. The following week, Emily returned to her old house but found no signs of Leonard. She knocked on the door several times, but no one answered. She decided to ask the neighbors, but no one knew his whereabouts. In the days that followed, she continued searching but had no success. She was about to give up when, one afternoon, she spotted an acquaintance of Leonard's on the street. He greeted her with a malicious smile. Hi, Emily. I see you're looking better than ever, he said. Emily got straight to the point. Do you know where I can find Leonard? The man laughed, a tone of irony in his voice. Oh, he's hanging out at the prison. Emily's eyes widened in surprise. Prison? What are you talking about? The man shrugged, still with that provocative smile. Arrested for fraud. I heard he took good advantage of your delicate state to collect a nice sum of money from people who wanted to help you. But instead of helping, well, he kept the money and enjoyed life. The authorities found out, and the rest is history. Emily was in shock, feeling a mixture of anger and indignation. She never imagined Leonard would be capable of something so low. Determined, she went to the prison to resolve once and for all what still tied her to him. Upon arrival, she asked to see him and waited. When Leonard entered the visitation room, his surprise was instant. Emily was beautiful, healthy, and confident. Exactly as he remembered her before the illness. Emily, Leonard began, but his voice faded as he noticed her cold gaze. Emily looked at him firmly. I'm not here to talk, Leonard. I just want a divorce. I'll send my lawyer to handle everything. I don't need anything more from you. Leonard tried to argue, but she cut him off quickly. Enjoy the time you have here to reflect on the choices you've made. Because I, Leonard, have moved on, she said, standing up. Good luck with your new life. She left the prison without looking back, a feeling of relief washing over her. In the days that followed, she took care of all the paperwork with her lawyer, and finally, the divorce was official. With freedom in her hands, Emily and Frank could finally move forward with their plans. They organized a small ceremony, just for their closest friends and, of course, with Gabriel as the most special guest. The boy was radiant, proud to finally be able to call Emily Mom. On the wedding day, the restaurant was closed for the celebration. Mrs. Grace, always present, prepared the decorations with simple but beautiful flowers and arrangements. Gabriel carried the rings, walking with a mischievous and joyful smile to the improvised altar. When it was time to exchange vows, Emily looked at Frank affectionately, her voice choked with emotion. Frank, you were my strength when I thought there was nothing left. And now, it's with you that I want to build my life. Thank you for being by my side, for believing in me, and for giving me the love I never thought I would have. Frank squeezed her hands and responded, his voice full of emotion. Emily, you brought me what I thought was out of my reach, a home, a family. I will spend the rest of my life trying to repay everything you've given me." When the ceremony ended, Frank and Emily, now married, were greeted by friends and family with applause and smiles. The party at the restaurant was small but full of joy. Gabriel, in particular, radiated happiness, dancing and hopping from table to table, always with a smile on his face. Later that night, when they were alone, Emily and Frank sat at a table, observing the restaurant that was now a part of their lives. The space was empty, the lights low, and the soft sound of party music still echoed. "You know, Frank," Emily said, intertwining her fingers with his, "I never thought I'd get here, that I'd have so much to be thankful for." He pulled her close and, in a soft tone, replied, "And I never thought I'd find someone like you, Emily. Someone who would transform my life and Gabriel's." The two remained in silence, a warm embrace full of promises for the future.